right, I'm going to interrupt your conversation, I'm sorry, and call you to attention. In fact, let's do this. So we've got, gosh, 6 people currently with us, and here's our crowd in person, so you can say hi, woohoo! Good to have you all here, whether in person or on Zoom. We are excited to have Carly Eichenauer today to share a bit about her journey of faith and belief. I'm not going to say much about Carly because that's the whole point of this, is that you will share about yourself in the process of our hearing her speak. Thank you for being here. Like I said earlier, this is a grant-funded event by both the Interfaith Youth Corps and the Goshen City Church of the Brethren to allow us to engage with one another, to learn about each other's faith journeys, and to share a little bit around the table as well. So thank you, Carly. Thank you all for being here, and welcome to Faith and Belief Luncheon. Come on up. Woo! So Carly.
Hello, everybody. So again, my name is Carly Eichenauer, and I'm a senior biology chemistry major here. In some ways, when I was preparing for this talk, I was racking my brain going, how is my story different than other people's? In some ways, I don't think my story is different, but in other ways, there are key moments in my life that have either altered my belief or made me really think and question about who I am and why I am that way. So to begin my story, I grew up here in North Manchester. I was baptized into the Manchester church, but first I was a baby and I was dedicated. So in the Church of the Brethren, we have a belief called the believer's baptism, where you are not baptized into the church until you're old enough to make that decision yourself as an adult. Now I was actually baptized here on campus because at that time our church had burned down in North Manchester. So I was actually dedicated into the church in Courtier Auditorium. So it's a fun little Manchester connection that I still have. And also in that time, our church was going through a radical change because, long story short, we're not in the region, we're not in the South Central Indiana district, which is kind of how the churches are organized, due to some political beliefs that differed. A pastor in our church wanted to perform a same-sex civil union, and so due to that, the church was taken out of the district because the other churches did not agree with that. So growing up was a very interesting time for me, just because it was a really defining moment in our district, but also in our church and in the community here, to be seen as that church that was open and affirming to all people. So that really helped found a set of beliefs that I have to really be accepting of all people. And so that was a really interesting basis growing up. You don't exactly realize how radical that is until you go to meet other people outside of your community and you go, oh wow, maybe I am really like that, different from other people. So then when I was in high school, I think as my junior year, I was baptized into the Church of the Brethren. And again, that was through a series of talks with my pastor. You have to go through a series of talks to really analyze why you believe that you want to be baptized into the church. And I really remember a few conversations about that, where we were talking about how faith is this really interesting, this journey that's not linear. It's something that you're always going through. You're going to be feeling different at times. It's going to feel like you're far apart, but you're close. You're going through the mist around the mountain, and you never really know when you're going to reach the top. And at that time, I thought he knew what he was talking about. I was like, oh yeah, I get that. But really looking back, if I could tell myself, my 16-year-old self at the time, did you really get it? There's no way that I understood what was going to happen. Just in my faith and belief growing up, just in those 5 years since then. So additionally, in high school, One of the main Church of the Brethren beliefs is serving others. So another very influential time in high school was when we raised $2.5 million as our youth group to build a new building for a daycare and preschool in town. So each youth group kind of comes up with their own service project over the years in our church. And this is just kind of a history that we have. One group created Kina Poca Mocha Coffee Shop. They fixed that and started it from the ground up. Another group started the prairie in front of our church to be able to have a farm sink in town. And then my group was sitting around. I remember that it was a Sunday right after Thanksgiving, so everybody's visiting their families except for like my family was there, plus a few other students, and we're going, what crazy idea can we do next? You know, like we don't have a bowling alley, but that just doesn't seem right to focus on a bowling alley. What else can we do to serve others in our community? And then we really kind of got stuck on this thing with how the daycare in town just didn't have the support that we believed a daycare should have. It was, you know, behind the foundry in town, putting out this black soot that just covered everything by the foundry. Most people did not know where this building was. If they tried to order pizzas, it would go to other locations around town. They would never get a pizza because no one knew where they were. And so through our projects, we really learned about early childhood education because we believed that was a way we could serve our community best by serving the very youngest members of our community so they could grow up in a better community overall. So that really helped practice those servant roles, those servant beliefs that we have and we're taught in the Church of the Brethren. So then after high school, another kind of shift happened in my life. So coming to college, I did want to choose a Brethren school, but a really interesting thing happened where in my first semester, my freshman year, I really took a step back. I started questioning, you know, who I was. Did I really want to be a person that went to church every Sunday? And I really just kind of found myself in a group of friends that didn't quite believe that. And so I kind of took some time, you know, is this something I want in my life? And I really wasn't connected to church too much going to college there that first semester. But then three things happened in that next semester that really kind of changed the route that I had started myself on. The first one was I went on the Brethren history Jan term trip with Becca and Katie Gray Brown. And that was a really interesting one. I wanted to take my religion core with Brethren history because growing up in the Brethren church, I pretty much knew everything that was going to be talked about in that class already. So I figured, you know, pretty easy A to get through that class, but a pretty fun one as well to travel off campus. But in doing so, it really made me analyze why my beliefs are the way they are by hearing again the foundation story of the Brethren in America, by seeing those people that really shaped the congregation, by shaping the church. And really, it made me become more introspective into why I believe what I believe. And I realized how important that was to me. The second thing kind of came from that trip. I joined the Simply Brethren group on campus. It's our group of Brethren students that meets about every other Tuesday night at 9 p.m. To just be who we are. It's a group of students that we know that we have very similar values and beliefs because we grew up in the Church of the Brethren. So we often enjoy the same activities, but we can learn about other people's faiths as well, their different experiences within their church. And so by doing so, I created a group of friends that I knew that would enjoy going to church. So very different, again, from that beginning of my freshman year when I surrounded myself with people who weren't necessarily interested in the kind of faith that goes to church every Sunday. Here I found a group of friends that even if we didn't go to church every Sunday, you know, we could still have those conversations about faith and belief and share in the same core values that I had grown dear to. And then the third thing that happened was towards the end of my freshman year, I became a member and applied to the Young Adult Steering Committee for the Church of the Brethren. And so this is a group that works with the head general offices of the Church of the Brethren to plan events for young adults in the Church of the Brethren. Now, you guys can attest being in the young adult community is a very weird time. If you're anything like me, you have friends who are married and they're having kids. There are people like me who are still going through school, and then there are people who are in the workforce right now. So everybody's just in this different stage in life. And it's a very interesting experience because nobody's going down the same path. And it's a little difficult to connect everybody. And it takes a lot more insight and thought and energy to be able to try and get people to connect into a larger young adult community. But this was also really influential to me because it made me realize that there was a young adult community. So apart from the Manchester community of young adults here, I had really felt like in the overall church, there's kind of a lack of young adults in faith. I can remember going to church at the North Manchester Church of the Brethren on Sundays, and the youth group, after I'm in college, the youth group would go into their room after worship, and then my parents would go off into their Sunday school group after worship, and I'd just kind of be sitting there like, well, who's not going to Sunday school today? Like I'll talk with all the other people in the church. And so I really was kind of in this in between of like, what do I do? What group do I belong to? And so by finding this young adult community in the Church of the Brethren, who went to the young adult conference every year, or national young adult conference every year, it really helped cement my belief that I did belong in the Church of the Brethren in a time when you kind of just felt like you didn't belong. And so that was a really monumental time to really find my place and find my group in the church. And then also, after I really kind of reaffirmed that I did belong in the church and my beliefs were, the same as what I grew up with, the pandemic came, so I had started going to church more. Even though it wasn't every Sunday, I'd go when I had time. And then this whole pandemic shut everything down. And my church has still not met in person since that last Sunday where people did not go to church. And so everything has pretty much shifted to online, except for a few different community events in the church, such as different concerts outside, different walking or hiking groups, and it's really connected a Facebook group of the church online. But in the different online worships, I found myself kind of ebbing and flowing with it. Sometimes I feel like I can watch those worships, and other times, especially when school's going on, to watch another screen is just strain for the eyes. It's hard to do. But there are ways that I found myself experimenting and adopting new spirituality practices alongside the way that the church has had to adopt new practices as well. So one of my favorite things that came out of the pandemic, actually, it's a little embarrassing, but I started doing yoga at the same time as listening to church, because I often find myself as an athlete struggling to stretch, like I hate to sit down for one period of time, but I sometimes I have a hard time focusing on the screen when watching online church. And so in doing so, I started a choga trend in my household when everybody was home to do some church yoga at the same time, where you could almost blend the spirituality practice of yoga in centering your mind as you're listening to the sermon and the prayers, and you're really meditating on those as you're going through your yoga practice. In other ways, I've also really tuned into meditation practices as well. That's something that I did not really know about much my first year here in Manchester. That has really helped me overall be able to touch in with myself. And as a result, I think I can touch into the higher spiritual powers around us overall. While I am a Christian, I do believe there are ways that we can adopt other belief practices into helping build our own spirituality. And so in doing so, I believe I've created a healthier mind for myself, but I've also created other connections as well, which helps me overall just live a better life. And so kind of in closing, if I could go back and tell myself when I was baptized at the age of 16, If I could tell myself even as my freshman year when I came onto campus, that your path is not going to be linear, I don't know if I would have believed myself at that point in time, but it is a very winding road that you don't necessarily quite understand why it ebbs and flows like it does, but it does. And that's something that no matter where you're at in your spiritual journey or in your beliefs right now, just know that there will always be opportunities to change, opportunities to find new practices, and learn more about yourself and beliefs through it all. Thank you.
Thank you, Carly. You mind staying up?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, thank you so much, Carly. It's good to hear from you, and it's good to reminisce about that trip we took several years ago, which we'll be doing again. Keep your eyes and ears open if you want to join us sometime. Yeah, Katie's here too. She thumbs up. So this is an opportunity, if you have any questions for Carly or any comments or reflections yourself, connections you wish to make. I think one of the things that struck me, Carly, is it's just so incredible how things can affect your life, like small things can affect your life in such great ways. And I have been so privileged to walk alongside you in some of these things in the last couple of years. And also a shameless plug, if any of you want to join us for the virtual National Young Adult Conference for the Church of the Brethren, everyone is welcome. And Carly is helping to plan it, so you know it's going to be awesome. So just let us know. Manchester is paying for it except for $10. That's your only commitment, and it's Memorial Day weekend, so we'd love to have you. Yeah, any questions or comments, connections, observations, and feel free, Zoom folks, to unmute yourself if you would like to ask as well.
Carly, hey, I love your idea of church and yoga at the same time. I might just borrow that. Are there particular things that you have like specifically gained from that besides obviously just the physical component of that?
I think I found myself staying focused a little bit more. Oftentimes during a real in-person worship, I find myself absentmindedly doodling, on the bulletin. I think just the older I've gotten, the more I've found that I have to be moving usually, like if I'm not taking notes physically in class, some other way, my wrist has to be going, I have to be moving. And in some ways, that does distract me as well.
I'm sorry, folks. I don't know if you all can hear that, but my jabber is ringing and it doesn't work. So I can't hang up. So we're going to have to just wait for the person to hang up. Because it's there, but it doesn't tell me anyone's actually calling. So, okay, there, it's over.
Yeah.
Thank you for your patience.
So
everyone.
I found myself focusing a lot more because I'm not, getting distracted by like, oh yeah, I just drew a really pretty flower, right now in church. But, by working to clear my brain while I'm stretching and doing yoga, I've really found that I can actually, focus on what they're saying better in the prayer, in the sermon, and actually having deeper thoughts about what's going on. So I think I've become a more critical thinker during worships because of that practice.
Thank you. I love it.
And Pastor Amy said if I did want to bring my yoga mat to church once we resume in person, she would fully be supportive of me rolling out a yoga mat in the back. So if anyone would like to join.
I'm actually curious, like, have any of you had other experiences like that? Like, for instance, I sometimes do puzzles during church or meetings, like I did during the mediation refresher for Peace Week on Sunday. I did a whole puzzle. But even before the pandemic, there are some churches that like do quilting or people will knit. Like, anyone else have fun things that they've done during a religious gathering? Or is it just us?
I would always doodle during church, and I felt like
Doodling?
it helped me like focus better.
Yeah.
When I would be thinking about how bored I was.
Yeah. My dad filled in the holes in every letter in the bulletin. Like like all the E's, the O's.
Yeah.
Kind of like meditative practice while you're listening.
Yeah.
It is. it is, you know, like I realize that I really hold on to whatever is being said when I go through guided meditations. And so it kind of is the same practice as well. You really hold on to what you're hearing as you're going through your meditation and through your yoga and focusing on that. Yeah.
Any other questions or comments or connections?
I have a question. So, Carly, I think that it's very common for us to take breaks from college at this time. When we're in college, we have this shift. We sometimes are physically away from the communities that we've grown up in. And I'm curious what you would counsel the church to do to be more open and maybe offer more opportunities. What kind of church would you counsel the Church of the Brethren to be to really meet young people where you're at?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I've had a few talks about this with Pastor Seth, another new pastor at the Manchester church, especially around this feeling of not belonging at times. And in some ways, I think if there were a young adult group at church to meet after, you know, the worship, that would really feel like you have a sense of belonging, a place and people that you belong to. And so the one thing we talked about with that is, you know, young adults don't necessarily show up to church every Sunday. So you can't necessarily count on having that group of people to show up that tend to have a good conversation. But is there some way that there is a curriculum set up that if you can say that you can pull it out, you know, if you do have a large enough group that does want to stick around after church, that if you want to have that conversation, you know, about, you know, what does Black Lives Matter look like in the church, to be able to have that conversation that's more intergenerational instead of just purely looking at, you know, a biblical scripture sometimes like the older adults will have. Is there a way that you can really bring in this current culture that we have, or the news cycle, but be able to have it flexible so it doesn't necessarily have to be for a specific Sunday, but it can be drawn upon at any point of time that you have a large enough group that wants to stick around and have that conversation. I think to have a flexible option that may not necessarily be every Sunday, but is there for people that want to have maybe less structure or a conversation just when they're there would be something that might be very beneficial. I also think, honestly, by having some of these online worships has been advantageous to young adults personally, just because I don't necessarily listen to the worships on Sunday morning when they're happening right then. It gives me a chance, if I want to sleep in, I've had a long week, I can listen to it, you know, in the afternoon. If I want to listen to it while walking the dog, you know, I can listen to it. I don't necessarily have to see, but, you know, I know enough of the songs to sing along as I'm walking, or I can listen to the sermon then. So to have different formats that are available to access at any times, I think are better for young adults to fit our busy schedules, those times when we're not necessarily able to commit to the in-person time and energy, but we can still connect to the greater church overall. And it could mean having conversations or Sunday school groups more on the Facebook setting, maybe outside of church as well. If it's, you know, a coffee hour or going on a walk together, I think that could garner a larger group of young adults who are more interested in the church, but it can fit their lifestyles as well.
Any other questions or comments for Carly? Well, thank you, Carly. Let's give her another round of applause. And thank you all for being here. This is our last Faith and Belief luncheon of this academic year. And so we will bring this back up in the fall. If you are interested in being a presenter or you know someone you would like to hear from, please let me know, or Kate is one of our interfaith programmers, so that we can start thinking about next year already to provide some great opportunities. If you loved this, or even if you didn't love it, and you want to see other Faith and Belief luncheons, we have a couple recordings on our website, the Manchester website, so you can just search Faith and Belief and it'll come up. I think we have 2 other recordings that you could share. Anything else? If not, then thank you for being here. Please take drinks, scotcheroos home. We paid for it. It is yours. Take as many as you want. And thank you for being here.